If everything you believed about the universe turned out to be an illusion, would you want to know the truth? For many, faith in an all-powerful God provides comfort, an explanation for life's mysteries, a source of guidance, and the promise of divine protection. But what if the universe wasn't governed by the will of a supreme being? What if, instead, it was ruled by something far more subtle, an invisible law that connects all things, shaping reality through cause and effect? Buddhism stands apart from many of the world's major religions in one fundamental way. It does not revolve around a creator God. But does that mean it rejects the divine entirely? Or is it simply asking a different question, one that leads not outward, but inward? To understand why Buddhists don't believe in a creator God, we must go back over 2,500 years, to the time of Siddhartha Gautama, the historical Buddha. Unlike many spiritual leaders of his time, the Buddha was not concerned with cosmic origins or divine will. His focus was something far more immediate and far more relevant to us today: suffering, and more importantly, how to end it. The Buddha realized that suffering is not something inflicted upon us by a higher power. It is an inevitable part of life. And rather than seeking salvation from an external deity, he offered something far more profound: a path to inner freedom, a way to break the cycle of pain through understanding, mindfulness, and personal responsibility. So, do Buddhists believe in God? Some might, others may not. But ultimately, that's not the question Buddhism is trying to answer. The real question is, how can we free ourselves from suffering and live a life of wisdom, compassion, and peace? And perhaps, just perhaps, that question is far more important. To understand why Buddhism does not center around a creator God, we must go back over 2,500 years to the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, the historical Buddha. Unlike many spiritual leaders of his time, the Buddha did not claim divine revelation or speak of an almighty deity controlling the universe. Instead, he focused on something far more personal and transformative: human experience, suffering, and the path to enlightenment. Siddhartha Gautama was born into a world of opulence. As a prince, he had everything: wealth, luxury, power. But deep in his heart, he felt a void, an unanswered question that neither riches nor indulgence could satisfy. Why did people suffer? Why did sickness, old age, and death exist? These questions haunted him. Determined to find the truth, he left everything behind: his family, his title, his lavish life, to embark on a journey that would change the world. For years, he wandered, studied under great teachers, practiced severe asceticism, and meditated in solitude. He sought wisdom in extreme deprivation, believing that self-denial was the key to enlightenment. But starvation and suffering brought him no closer to the truth. Then, in a moment of profound realization, he understood the path to awakening was not through indulgence, nor through extreme austerity, but through balance, what he called the middle way. On the night of his enlightenment, Siddhartha faced every illusion, every attachment, every fear that bound him to suffering. As dawn broke, he awoke, not just from sleep, but from the ignorance that clouds the mind. He had seen the truth, the nature of existence, and the cause of suffering. From that moment on, he was no longer just Siddhartha. He was the Buddha, the awakened one. What made the Buddha different from other spiritual figures of his time was his approach. He did not claim divine inspiration, nor did he position himself as a savior. He was a teacher, a guide, someone who had walked the path and now illuminated it for others. He did not speak of gods creating the world or divine beings granting salvation. Instead, he taught that suffering was caused by attachment, desire, and ignorance, and that liberation could be found by understanding and overcoming them. Unlike religious traditions that look to a higher power for answers, Buddhism places the responsibility on the individual. You are not at the mercy of a creator, nor are you powerless against fate. Your actions, your karma, shape your reality. Through mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom, you have the ability to transform your life. So if Buddhists don't worship a creator God, does that mean they reject divinity altogether? Not necessarily. Instead of looking for an external deity, they turn inward to the potential for awakening within every being. The question was never about the existence of a God. The question was always, how do we free ourselves from suffering? And that, more than anything, is what truly matters. The Buddha did not deny the existence of divine beings. In fact, Buddhist scriptures often mention celestial realms filled with powerful deities, or devas. But these beings, no matter how mighty, were still bound by the laws of karma and samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. In other words, they were not immortal, not omniscient, and certainly not creators of the universe. The devas, revered in many Buddhist traditions, live in higher realms, surrounded by splendor. Their existence, however, is not eternal. Unlike the omnipotent gods of monotheistic traditions, these celestial beings are simply another form of life, more fortunate than humans, but still subject to impermanence. They too experience birth and death. They too are caught in the web of karma. Even the gods sought the wisdom of the Buddha. They came to him not as masters of existence, but as seekers of truth. The Buddha, in his infinite wisdom, was not dazzled by their power. He saw beyond their celestial radiance, beyond their pleasures, and reminded them that even they were not free from suffering. In time, their fortunes would change, their pleasures would fade, and they would be reborn into the cycle of existence once again. So if Buddhism acknowledges the existence of divine beings, why doesn't it revolve around them? The answer lies in the Buddha's most profound realization. Liberation does not come from external beings, no matter how powerful they seem. It comes from within, from understanding the nature of reality, from letting go of attachment, and from cultivating wisdom and compassion. Rather than directing prayers to higher powers, the Buddha taught self-reliance. He emphasized the law of cause and effect, karma. He urged his followers to take responsibility for their actions, for their choices, and ultimately, for their own liberation. No divine being, no celestial savior could do the work for them. In the end, Buddhism is not about rejecting the divine. It is about understanding it differently. It shifts the focus from seeking salvation from above to cultivating enlightenment from within. Instead of asking for favors from the gods, Buddhism invites us to awaken, to see clearly, to act with kindness, and to find freedom, not in the heavens, but in the wisdom of the present moment. During the Buddha's time, many in India worshipped Brahma, the so-called creator of all things. But the Buddha offered a strikingly different perspective. He told a story of a being who was born into a newly formed universe. This being, finding itself alone, wished for companionship, and soon other beings appeared. Thinking that his desire alone had brought them into existence, this being declared himself their creator. But in truth, it was simply a misunderstanding, one that persisted for generations. For eons, these beings believed Brahma was their creator. They worshipped him, praised his wisdom, and sought his blessings. And yet, Brahma himself was under an illusion. He had merely been the first to arrive in this newly formed world. He had no memory of previous existences, no knowledge of the greater cycle of the universe. His belief in his own divinity was an accident of circumstance. This story was not just a myth, it was a lesson about how easily beings can be deceived, even by their own experiences. The Buddha understood that the search for a single creator was misguided. The universe had no beginning, no first cause. It was a web of interdependent events, driven by karma and impermanence. Instead of seeking refuge in an all-powerful deity, the Buddha taught his followers to seek refuge in wisdom, mindfulness, and ethical living. He urged them to take responsibility for their own actions, rather than hoping for divine intervention. Liberation was not granted from above. It had to be realized from within. So does Brahma exist? Perhaps, but is he the ultimate creator? The answer is no. He, like all beings, is bound by the cycles of existence. And this, more than anything, is the great insight of the Buddha, understanding reality as it is, not as we wish it to be. For the Buddha, the real concern was not the origins of the universe, but the suffering that humans experience here and now. He believed that looking to a deity for salvation could be dangerous, not because such a deity necessarily existed or did not exist, but because reliance on divine intervention could lead people away from personal responsibility. Suffering is universal. It spares no one, rich or poor, powerful or weak. And yet, instead of searching for an external force to lift this burden, the Buddha taught that the answer lies within. Each person has the capacity to understand their suffering, to see its roots, and most importantly, to break free from it. This understanding did not come easily. Before he was the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama lived in a world of luxury, shielded from pain. But the moment he stepped beyond the palace walls, he saw the truth. Life is fleeting, and suffering is inescapable. This realization ignited a fire within him. He could no longer live in ignorance. He had to find the way out. Over 2,000 years later, the Buddha's insight remains just as relevant. We all suffer, but instead of confronting it, we often look for distractions. We turn to possessions, relationships, even spiritual beliefs, hoping something external will take the pain away. But the Buddha's wisdom is clear. Only by facing suffering directly, by understanding its nature, can we find true peace. So what did the Buddha teach? He did not promise miracles. He did not speak of a divine force that would erase suffering. Instead, he laid out a path of mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom, a path that anyone, regardless of their beliefs, could walk. Do not believe something simply because it is written in scriptures. Do not follow blindly. Instead, see for yourself, experience, understand. Only then will you know what is true. The Buddha's teachings are not about blind faith. They are about awakening, not to a divine being, but to the truth of our own existence. And through that awakening, we find something greater than salvation. We find freedom. Imagine this. Two men are struggling in a river. One calls out to the sky, pleading for a deity to save him. The other starts swimming towards the shore. Who do you think has a better chance of survival? Throughout history, people have placed their hopes in unseen forces, expecting divine intervention to solve their problems. They wait for miracles. They pray for fortune, and they plead for change. But the Buddha asked, what if, instead of waiting, we took action? What if we stopped relying on unseen forces and started relying on ourselves? The Buddha taught that true liberation does not come from the heavens, nor from the blessings of a divine power. It comes from wisdom, from self-awareness, from taking full responsibility for one's own actions. The law of karma is not about divine rewards or punishments. It is about cause and effect. Every choice we make, every action we take, shapes the course of our lives. The message is simple yet profound. We are not powerless. Our destiny is not preordained by celestial beings. We are the architects of our own future. Instead of waiting for divine intervention, we must cultivate discipline, wisdom, and compassion to bring about real change. Faith can be comforting, but faith alone is not enough. If we want to break free from suffering, we must take the journey ourselves. The Buddha did not offer prayers, he offered a path, a way to walk, a way to see, a way to be truly free. Buddhism teaches that our actions, our thoughts, words, and deeds shape our reality. Not the whims of a god, not divine fate, but our own choices. This is the essence of karma, and this is why prayer alone is not enough. The law of karma is not about cosmic reward or punishment. It is not dictated by an external force, nor is it a system of fate beyond our control. Instead, karma is the simple, undeniable truth that our actions bear consequences. Each thought we nurture, every word we speak, every deed we commit, sets a course, one that will shape not only our future, but the world we inhabit. The Buddha did not teach resignation to karma, he taught empowerment. If suffering arises from our actions, then so too does liberation. We are not bound by the past, nor are we condemned to repeat our mistakes. At any moment, we can change. With effort, with awareness, with wisdom, we can reshape our destiny. To understand karma is to understand that we hold the key to our own transformation. We are not prisoners of fate. We are sculptors of our own existence. Every moment, every decision, every act of kindness or cruelty, these are the brushstrokes that paint the canvas of our lives. So if you wish for kindness, be kind. If you seek wisdom, strive to understand. If you long for peace, cultivate it in your heart. The world reflects what we put into it. And through karma, through the responsibility we take for our actions, we create not only our own fate, but the fate of all those around us. This is the gift of karma, not a promise of punishment, not a decree of destiny, but a path. A path that each of us can walk, with intention, with mindfulness, and with the profound understanding that we are, in every sense, the authors of our own story. So ask yourself, what story will you write today? The Buddha was once asked by a ruler why he did not teach about God. He replied, "I teach about suffering and the end of suffering." He understood that arguments about divine existence do little to ease human pain. Instead, he offered something practical: the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, a roadmap to inner peace and wisdom. He did not claim to be a god, nor did he promise divine salvation. He did not perform miracles to prove his power, nor did he demand blind devotion. Instead, he spoke with reason, with clarity, with a deep understanding of the human condition. He was not a deity to be worshipped, but a teacher to be followed. The Buddha did not ask for faith. He asked for understanding. He urged his followers to question everything, even his own teachings. "Do not believe anything simply because I have said it," he told them. "Test it for yourself. See if it leads to wisdom, to compassion, to the cessation of suffering." This is what makes Buddhism unique. It is not about worship, but about transformation. It is not about seeking blessings from above, but about cultivating insight from within. The Buddha's path is not one of submission, but of awakening, a journey of self-discovery, where wisdom is earned, not granted. More than 2,000 years later, his words still resonate, not as commandments from a divine ruler, but as the guidance of a compassionate teacher, lighting the way for all who seek freedom from suffering. And that, in itself, is more powerful than any miracle. So do Buddhists believe in God. Some might in their own way, others may not. But the core of Buddhism does not require belief in a supreme deity. Instead, it asks, how can we reduce suffering? How can we cultivate kindness, wisdom, and inner peace? At its heart, Buddhism is not about metaphysical debates or theological doctrines. It is about life, how we live, how we think, how we relate to the world. The Buddha's teachings are a guide, not a commandment. They do not demand worship. They invite exploration, compassion, mindfulness, wisdom. These are not divine gifts but human potentials. They are seeds within each of us, waiting to be cultivated. The Buddha did not seek followers. He sought seekers. He did not promise heaven. He pointed the way to freedom from suffering, here and now. And so, rather than asking whether Buddhists believe in God, perhaps we should ask a different question. How can we live more fully, more wisely, more compassionately? Because in the end, belief alone is not enough. It is how we live that truly matters. Ultimately, Buddhism is not about blind faith. It is about experience. It is about looking within, questioning assumptions, and discovering truth for oneself. As the Buddha himself said, "Do not believe anything simply because you have heard it. Do not believe in anything merely on the authority of your teachers, but after observation and analysis, when you find that it agrees with reason and is conducive to the good and benefit of all, then accept it and live by it." This practice extends beyond meditation. It is found in the way we speak, in the way we treat others, in the patience we cultivate, and the understanding we nurture. The teachings of the Buddha are not meant for temples alone. They are meant for the streets, for the marketplace, for the everyday struggles we all face. The true path of Buddhism is not about rituals or recitations, but about action. It is about the choices we make, the habits we build, and the love we extend to those around us. It is about presence, being here fully, in each moment. So if we seek happiness, let us cultivate it. If we long for peace, let us embody it. If we wish to change the world, let us begin with ourselves. That is the heart of Buddhism, not belief, but practice, not words, but actions, not seeking, but being. Perhaps in the end, the question of divinity matters less than we think. The true essence of Buddhism is not found in debates about gods, but in the way we live, the choices we make, and the peace we cultivate within. The Buddha did not promise salvation from above. He offered a lamp to light our way, and so the path is ours to walk. Every moment is an opportunity to awaken. Every step, a chance to live with wisdom, compassion, and mindfulness. The journey is not about seeking something beyond ourselves, but realizing that everything we need is already here within.